to the interwebs. Why don't you kick it off while I make sure that everything's chugging along here.
All right. So let's call this meeting to order and go around and introduce ourselves, I guess. I'm Arkady Goldman-Sorlov, co-chair of the Rider Oversight Committee.
Stefan Wunsch, co-chair of the ROC.
Andy Riekert with CTPS.
Leonard Higgins, one of the co-chairs for the Capital Investment and Finance Subcommittee.
I'm Sophie Blackhurst, I'm a public member.
Ryan Bolicelli from MassDOT.
Jesse Saki, I'm a public member.
Spencer Fontaine, also a public member. Brian Benjamin, public member.
Brad Johnson, public member.
Carl Segler, public member.
Karen Rosick, public member.
Dave Barker, customer technology, MBTA.
All right.
Just for the purposes of a little safety briefing, there's a couple of cords going across the floor, a little bit of a trip hazard. One's in the middle here, so it shouldn't be a big deal, but the other cord is going across to the wall right where WIG is, so heads up for that. There's a lot of slack on it, so even if your foot gets in it, it's probably not going to cause anybody any damage or the equipment, but just a heads up for that. I think that's the only trip hazard. Flashing back to prior days of safety briefings, is anyone here certified for CPR in case of emergency? Ryan and, oh, excellent, thank you very much. And if I'm not mistaken, there's an AED out at the guard's booth. What am I forgetting for the usual safety briefing? I think that covers it, right? Oh, right, the rallying point. If we have to evacuate, we'll meet outside the building on the side that's opposite, that's near the Dunkin' Donuts. Not inside the Dunkin' Donuts, but outside, close to that. Okay.
All right. We will open with our traditional initial public comment period. There will also be a public comment period at the end. Does anyone want to make a public comment right now? All right. In that case,
Barry, did you
turn
raise
it
your
over
hand?
to you. Did you?
Yeah, just a bit of news. Barry Steinberg, Association for Public Transportation. There was an article in the Herald, this is about 2.5 weeks ago, that Lyft and Uber not only do not reduce congestion, they add to congestion. You can look at that article.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. So with that, we'll turn it over to you, I guess.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dave Barker, and I work in the customer technology department at the MBTA. I don't have screen mirroring, which means I will either have to present like this or just try to remember all my slides. So maybe actually, if someone else can think of some other public comment while I get screen mirroring turned on.
Sure, no problem. Let me focus that ever so slow.
I can make a brief comment on the topic of battery electric buses as the technology of the future. There was a very interesting Transportation Research Board white paper that came out recently on experiences with battery electric buses, and to summarize, they are very mixed. And Foothill Transit is very happy. Their riders are not so happy that they have to wait 15 minutes in the middle of the route for the bus to charge. Yeah.
But is that because, I'm just curious, is that because of a long route or?
They put their charger at like their central transit center, which is in the middle of the route. So, but that's where they had space for it. So there are always constraints.
Make a mental note not to do that.
David, again, thank you very much for being here. David is, actually, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before starting, because your background is quite varied and worthy of sort of patting yourself on the back a little bit, I think.
Well, I don't know about that, but I a longtime MBTA employee now. I started at the MBTA in 2002, originally in plans and schedules, and moved over to focusing on technology projects. So focused on operations technology and customer-facing information technology for most of my time at the MBTA. That includes, for instance, in 2009 when we first got on Google Maps, and you could plan trips for the first time on Google Maps. So I was involved with that. We're actually going to touch on something very closely related to that in the presentation, as well as the bus dispatching and announcement system, and been involved in other countdown projects and alert projects. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about. So I was invited to speak. I wasn't really told what to talk about, so my first thought was to just spend the entire time walking you through this diagram in excruciating detail. And then in a way I am, because this is a map of all of the different real-time information, alerts, information that flows from our vehicles, from our buses, from the signal system on the subway, into various systems and out into our API, onto the website, into signs. And we've been working, and we're doing work in a lot of these areas, and so that will reflect a lot of what I'm going to talk about. But one thing that we are doing in customer technology and in the MBTA is taking a customer-focused approach and an actual measurable customer-focused approach, which involves a lot of interviewing customers and doing tests to see how focus groups to see how they like certain designs or approaches. So I'm going to organize, this will be a grand sweep of a lot of different projects, some recently completed, some in progress, all around the theme of transit information for customers. And I'll organize it according to some of the questions that customers might have during their trip. So starting off with, well, where do I go to start my trip? Where is my vehicle? Well, when will my vehicle be here? How do I know when it will be here? Why isn't it here yet? And, well, what are you doing to help get it here on time? So we'll start with, where do I go to start my trip? And I referenced Google Maps earlier in 2009, and we're still continuing to refine that data. And one thing that the MBTA did in the past year, you may be familiar with the PADI survey from other contexts, but I'm going to talk about it just from a customer information context. So recently, the MBTA, led by the Department of System-Wide Accessibility, went out and surveyed dozens of data points on all of our 8,000 bus stops about how accessible they were. How wide is the landing pad? Where is the nearest curb cut? Is it marked adequately? And the one thing that is being done with that data is to identify stops that are really not accessible and fix them or move them or remove them. But another thing that we were able to do is work with them to filter all of that very rich level of information about each bus stop down to just 3 values of, is this bus stop accessible or is it not, or is it maybe kind of borderline for a person in a wheelchair, and we added that to our public data and our website in 2018. Our station accessibility was already on our website and in our data, and so that was cool. And I don't know if it's connected, but you may have seen this in this month. Google Maps announced for the first time wheelchair accessible trip planning in Google Maps. This is already available in the MBTA.com trip planner, but a whole lot more people use Google Maps worldwide than the MBTA trip planner. And for the first time, you can launch wheelchair accessible trips. You can plan wheelchair accessible trips. They've launched this in 6 cities, and Boston was one of those cities. And this is sort of the graphic from their announcement, and they happened to pick Boston a Boston trip for their rolling graphics. So I'm not saying this necessarily means that Google thinks that we have the best data about what's accessible and what isn't, but I do think there's sort of a through line to all of the work that we've done on making the service accessible and identifying what is accessible and what isn't, and the fact that right now you can plan a Google Maps, an accessible trip using Google Maps in 6 cities around the world, and we're living in one of them. Question?
I'm just curious how that partnership, or partnership is a strong word, how that relationship works with Google. It's obviously the timing there. You guys launched in February. They launched in March. They had to have a data set first. So did they reach out to you 6 months ago and say, hey, we're going this route? Are you guys do you have XYZ data elements to provide us?
So they draw from sort of our same public data feed that goes to the website, and they know that we publish to everyone. So as soon as we added that information, they had access to it. They weren't doing this kind of trip planning at that time, so they weren't using it yet. We've been in communication with them about this issue and about some of our some more ambitious things that we'd like to do in this particular area as well. So we are in communication with them about it and about some of the different challenges. We didn't know that they were launching this at this time. We were actually surprised. We knew they'd been working on it, but we were a little flattered to find out that we were a launch city. We weren't actually expecting that.
That's great. And so that it all worked because you didn't make up your own values for it. You followed that PADI program, so your data elements were kind of easy enough for them to interpret that they were there.
Yeah, we filtered down the PADI data to something that Google can actually use as just, is it a wheelchair accessible trip or not? There's actually a lot more nuance in the data source because a stop that's wheelchair accessible for one person in a wheelchair might not be wheelchair accessible for someone else in a wheelchair. So we did some work to really try to thread that needle and come up with the values that would be most useful.
Why would that be the case, that it would not be that more different kinds of wheelchairs couldn't access?
Basically different wheelchairs are different shapes and have different abilities to maneuver. A motorized wheelchair has sort of a different layout than a push wheelchair.
Okay.
Beyond that, I am out of my area of expertise.
That's fine, that's fine. And just out of curiosity, what are the other 5 cities?
Oh, man.
That's okay, don't worry about it. I was just curious.
Sydney, I think New York, London is definitely one of them.
Okay, fine, thanks.
I get partial credit for some of them.
It's all bonus.
And some other improvements that we're working on in GTFS right now, and then I'll move on to some of the real-time data improvements, is identifying where you actually enter a station and how long it takes to walk from one point to another, so that, for example, if you're getting directions to State Street, we can direct you to a specific entrance, and a specific entrance that will hopefully not involve doubling back almost a block through the tunnel underground, and so hopefully help people plan the best trips possible. So once you decide where to go, you want to know, well, where is my vehicle? Used with permission, we have a side-by-side comparison here showing a change that we just made to our commuter rail data this month. We had been accessing the current location of trains through kind of a convoluted technique in which one server talks to another server, and no one wants to touch that server, et cetera. But Keolis built an API, sort of a new API into an old and sensitive system, which they're also in the process of working to replace in the longer term, and gave us access to that, which we built an interface to our sort of open data systems, and as a result, our commuter rail trains are faster. Or at least when you look at a train's current location, it is a much fresher location than you would have looked at before. So you can see, at a given moment in time, this is where a train would have appeared to be, and this is now a report. So the latency has gone down from between 1 and 2 or even 2.5 minutes to more like 15 to 30 seconds. Another part, sorry, this slide is, I got feedback that this was hard to read, and it is hard to read, so apologies for that. Another thing that made that possible is Concentrate, a new application that we wrote to basically publish our data faster, to pull data from all these different sources and update them in our new API very, very quickly. This also is relates to the new API itself, which we launched in December, which is, the new API is 300% faster in its responses than the old one, but also Concentrate allows it to shave quite a few seconds off so that the data, the locations are more current, etc. Concentrate is also the MBTA's first first piece of software that is released open source, which I think is sort of a really interesting milestone that has gone by pretty quietly. If that means that you can actually look at the code itself, if you can read this and can make out the E in the end by going to GitHub and going to GitHub/MBTA, and you can see the software, and if you find any bugs, you can submit the fixes right there.
Very cool.
That's really
and
excellent.
it's
great.
yeah.
Congratulations.
So yeah, that's the team that wrote this. It's written in Elixir, which is sort of a very, very cutting edge language, which has helped us to sort of put together a cutting edge team. So other information we're working on in this project, we're working on this area. Our bus locations, right now we have the location from each bus every 60 seconds, more or less. We want to get that down to every 2 to 3 seconds. And we have a plan to do that with some basic, by putting some low-cost cellular trackers onto all of our buses that will augment, not replace, but augment the data that we're getting from our dispatching system. That project is in process, and our plan is to have that online in late 2018, which is an aggressive timeline, but that is what we are shooting for.
David?
Yes.
Before the entire fleet of buses have those new modules or that new equipment installed, will there be availability for some of that data from the vehicles that do have it so that people could see what the difference is like? Or is it ideally just going to be when the whole fleet is deployed, then it's actually made available?
As we add it to one bus after another, those buses will, the lower latency data will be immediately available to the public.
That's great.
And is that going to be replaced at the time that, as each bus is added, so it will replace the data from the dispatch software?
It's really going to be a combination of data, so we'll be sort of fusing it together because, for example, what we have from our buses now is excellent in urban canyons and even in tunnels because it has a dead reckoning system, which the new sort of cheaper system will not. So it will, and so there's other data that will only be available from the dispatching system. So it'll actually be a fusion of sort of the best data of both worlds.
And I assume you mean dispatching in ABS. Is it ABS? I'm just curious.
Yes, I mean our Transit Master, which is our, we call it the CAD AVL system. I know everything has several different acronyms that it goes by, but Computer Aided Dispatch Automated Vehicle Location.
Okay, great.
Carl?
Does this relate, having the higher frequency data relate to interfacing with transit signal priority systems, or I know you're talking about customer facing.
Right, it does, but not directly. Our buses are, we hear from our buses every 60 seconds, more or less. When the customer will hear from them more is when they reach an intersection at which we do have traffic signal priority, they send a request right away. They say, they don't wait for a 60-second cycle. They say, I just crossed the threshold, I'm making a request now. Now, one challenge that we've had with traffic signal priority is tuning it and really evaluating how much are we getting from it and what are the best parameters to get something from it. And having data every couple seconds from buses will actually help us a lot with that. Because right now we know we made the request, but then we don't really know what happened for a while. So it's hard to tell from our existing data how much of the time it's actually causing a a green light to be successfully held for a bus and how often it's held almost long enough but not quite, or something like that. Thanks.
I'm wondering, because of that, would there perhaps be any value in targeting the garages that serve the routes that have the transit signal priority already? Or is there other factors that go into where that new equipment gets deployed and when?
Where we're just going to deploy it everywhere as fast as possible.
Great. Civil to better.
Okay, so when will, once a customer knows where the vehicle is, it's, well, what I really want you to know is when will the vehicle be here so that I can get on it. So that's not about where the vehicle is, but it's about predictions. Our subway prediction software, we've used a software called HRT, and we're in the process of replacing that with new software called RTR, it's Rapid Transit Real Time. Right now, we're just in the process of feature parity and replacing, phasing out parts of what HRT does and replacing it with RTR. Once we have feature parity, we'll be able to add features to RTR that we just couldn't add to HRT. The number one requested feature along those, in that category is a delay message. So right now, if there's a saying in Davis Square that it's a wonderful place to live because the red line is always a minute away.
I was going to ask you that exact question.
So we want to, and that might not even be the best illustration of sort of the particular change I'm talking about. I just love the expression. So one thing we wanted to, that
it's not
be able
that
to
bad.
do is
It's not that bad. It's like 5 minutes max, but sorry.
Now that I've said that, I think I'll just use a different example because it illustrates it a little better. If a train is not moving, we'll just hold on the time on the sign 2 minutes away. Still 2 minutes, so it's clearly not 2 minutes because it's been showing 2 minutes for 5 minutes.
Right.
So we'll be able to replace that with stopped with something like delayed or 1 station away, not moving. Which is it's a real kind of a modest change. It doesn't sound like it should be that complicated, but it is something where with the HRT software we just weren't able to build.
So the buses already do this because they do say when the buses, at least next bus does tell me it's going to be delayed, and I assume that this already exists for the buses and not for the subways.
Next bus does have a delay flag that they use sometimes.
Okay, yes.
I think rarely.
Rarely.
I
I see it a lot on the key routes that I
Oh, I don't have a smartphone, I have a flip phone, and I call next bus. And I know the stop number for some of the stops, and yes, I've never heard it delayed. I've only heard either a lie or the truth.
Well, I find
and I think we'll get to that. Yeah, and a delay can mean a lot of things. And in this case, I specifically mean when a vehicle is close by but it's not moving, so it's not actually 2 minutes away, even though it normally would be in that position.
Yeah.
But delay also can refer to alerts, and we'll be talking about alerts later too.
Yeah, so can I just have one more question on that? So I think if you just said pause or anything like that, that would be helpful. It's not that big a deal, actually, because people get used to it, including the Davis. But the sign you've got on the slide here, there's often instances where it's helpful to know when you're outside before you enter a station and kind of, tap and go down when the vehicle's going to arrive. Because if you can walk in 10 minutes or if you can walk in 5 minutes, depending on the time of day, that might be a better choice. Is that something that you have a policy of expanding, kind of like the outdoor or gateway signs when someone just comes into a station?
That's something that we're taking some steps in that area, and I think we're sort of at a point where we're about to sort of take a fresh look at our strategy there.
Yeah.
Our overall sign strategy, and how can we get the most bang for the buck going forward. So it's one thing that we'll address that in some stations is are advertising displays.
Yeah,
And
right.
some stations have those
Right.
outdoors, and those will have real-time information on them. That's one thing we're working with the advertising vendor on. But that's not really an answer, because that's a fairly small number of stations.
Yeah.
And the real answer is we're thinking about it in strategizing.
Yeah, the other thing I would say in a similar vein, you may get to it later, the busier bus stops, the same thing would be helpful if you don't, there's some people without phones, or, if you don't need to get your phone out for another reason, and you have a way of inexpensively displaying the next buses, that's really helpful.
You guys you're stealing all the material from my
Okay.
slides.
I'm sorry. I'll stop.
Well, some stops have that, right?
Yeah, a few.
Yeah, I know, like the Haymarket has an LCD.
Yeah.
They also the advertising side of Haymarket that goes downstairs, but it actually has the countdowns for the sun.
Yeah, it's super.
Yeah, Schwartz and Sullivan have it.
Yep.
But I mean,
but those are the major hubs.
Yeah.
And if
But
I follow you right,
Some of the ones that aren't at subway stops, it would be nice that if they're popular bus stops and they're not attached to.
I was a part of the beta for the next bus, and we actually had a sign in Bellingham Square in Chelsea, and then when the beta stopped, it took the sign away, and it was the best thing.
Yeah, but you anticipated my question, really. So example, Davis Square, there's often people waiting for buses late at night, and you don't know, when it's supposed to come, you can look at a clock.
and at Davis Square, because that's an area where tactically we can get there just sort of with our existing technology, and it's just a matter of getting to that point in the roadmap, so that we can actually do the work to put it on there. But the real challenge is the 99% of our 8,000 bus stops that aren't in the station. So I will get to that.
Okay.
Okay, so RTR, we've been sort of rolling out in phases. We actually hit a milestone just 4 hours ago, where using our API, or MBTA.com, it's actually RTR predictions that you're looking at for all of Subway. And then next is adding in more Subway signs. RTAT's better bus predictions. We're just in the process of rebidding our bus prediction contract. So I don't want to say too much, because you always have to be careful when you're in the process of bidding something. So I'll just say that we're entering into a new competitive process with a focus on the most accurate predictions possible in a way that to reflect sort of the evolution of the market.
What's the time frame for that, do you think?
It's this summer.
Great.
Yeah, I've got it on the slide. Spring summer 2018.
Oh, that's for the completion of the bid process and accepting a new vendor?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Because it's as a service, so there's no hardware involved.
I see.
So
This is the priority this time for predictions is the most accurate. Do I want to know what the priority was last time?
No, it's a very reasonable question. The bid process last time was low bid meeting certain standards. So we established standards of you need to be at least X% accurate, and if you meet that standard, we will take the lowest cost. Now that said, the market is evolving, so there weren't many players even offering this service last time we did this, and they're sort of it's a competitive market now in ways that it wasn't before. And I don't know, we're doing some small changes to commuter rail, and I know that Railroad Ops is working on sort of a larger improvement to the PTIS system that is behind a lot of the commuter rail predictions. I'm not well versed enough in those changes to speak to them, but I didn't want to leave commuter rail out when everyone else is getting better predictions. Commuter rail is too, but I'm not as involved in that. Okay, well, how do I know when my vehicle will get here? If only there were some kind of sign. We are going to be experimenting this year with solar-powered e-ink displays. this is an experiment. It might not work. It might turn out that this is not a technology that will sort of withstand our operating environment, our winter, or it might not refresh fast enough. But we're interested in it, and so we're going to try it out at several Green Line stops. Part of the reason for the interest in solar-powered display is e-ink, because it's a low-power technology, and so therefore it's compatible with solar. Solar, because it makes the equipment much easier to install. If installing a countdown sign at a bus stop, a big part of the cost can come from the countdown sign, but then what really kills you is running power to that bus stop and other power. So we're looking at solar-powered options very carefully.
I would suggest that you do, that you have some mechanism of wherever the solar collector is, that they get cleaned at some predetermined interval.
Yeah, how that works is the kind of thing that will be part of our assessment, and that we'll learn in the pilot. But yeah, brushing off snow is, of course, very important, and then just keeping it clean is generally.
Sorry, just going back to that last one. In terms of its deployments, I know you're a pilot, you're piloting Green Line, but I think logically this doesn't show you anything that a cell phone app wouldn't necessarily show you, right?
That's correct.
So I guess my only recommendation would be, as you're looking to deploy, if you move past the pilot and you deploy it, it's find the communities where it would be most helpful, where you would think you'd have the lowest usage of smartphones in terms of rolling it out. So putting them in front of I don't want to be ageist, but putting this in front of the bus stop, in front of the senior home, as opposed to putting it on the Green Line in a youthful area.
I'm just writing that down. You're right, that'll be important to consider.
Actually, it just occurred to me. The last time we spoke with David Block-Schachter, he was telling us about the pilot of Bluetooth beacons for visually impaired riders. Could there be any bolt-on to this? Since these are solar powered, that might address one of the other David's concerns about the battery life of those Bluetooth beacons. But if there's going to be a deployment of, even as a demo, some solar powered things, do you happen to know off the top of your head, is there any facility for having a Bluetooth beacon in these units?
Some vendors do offer that, and we're interested in that. Some vendors offer it as a substitute for audio, which we're not interested in.
Right. Yeah.
Where I said we're going to be piloting this at Green Line stations, we're actually going to be piloting it at D-branch stations. And that at first must seem entirely illogical, because D-branch stations are the ones that have countdown information already. But the reason we're piloting it there is because they have countdown information and they have audio. What vendors have in the market that they're able to sell to us right now does not have audio yet. But a lot of the vendors say that they will have audio ready very, very soon, just a few months, maybe next year. So that's why we're piloting something without audio. But we would not be able to deploy, or we would not, we wouldn't intend to deploy this in production at other bus stops or at DC or E-surface stations without audio. But yeah, beacons definitely could tie into this. It would only be at some bus stops,
Sure.
though, and we want
Very cool.
I'm curious to know if there's going to be a set. I live in a neighborhood that most of the people speak another language. Is this going to be in multi-language? Or there's going to be, I know the signs, you press a button and it changes the language, and is this feature going to be available on these? And I'd like it to be, because I live in a neighborhood with a lot of Spanish speakers who would benefit from this.
That's none of the units that we are piloting have a button and that's not something that we haven't been planning as part of this pilot.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that we can't shift and test it out later in the pilot, but it's not something that we've planned at this time.
Thanks.
I then wanted to add sort of a very vague slide, just to reference sort of what I referred to earlier of, we want to take a look at generally the screens that we currently have out there and what we're showing on them and where we have information, where we don't, and what, where we can get the most bang for our buck and what we want to add to what's out there now. So strategy, we're not sure what that's going to look like, which is why I just used a picture that I found of what looks like TV listings, actually, not countdown predictions. So we won't use that exact option. So why isn't it here yet? Service alerts. We are doing a couple things. One is, you may have heard about this, we're experimenting with alert language. We're iterating on it, so we've already started, we've moved away from minor, moderate, severe, and instead are giving delays in characterized in a number of minutes. And we're, mostly the feedback to that has been positive so far. We've gotten some, it seems like it does introduce some ambiguity of how customers should use this information. Okay, does that mean that I can count on the bus being 20 minutes late, so I should arrive 15, et cetera? But we are, I think we don't know exactly what we're going to end up with, but I think what's really interesting is that we're taking an iterative approach in which we're trying different things, surveying customers for feedback, and then we'll try something new.
I think it's been really helpful to get this, because my idea was a minor delay. I used to see those things. It's apparently different than what your T thought was a minor delay, and I'm sure that's what, is frustrating. So it's much better to have something, even if it's not, obviously it's only so precise, but it's just much better to have something saying everything. It's about 20 minutes as opposed to, if it's minor or major.
I think the actual detail is very helpful too. So like the bus is time delayed because of traffic on the Tony Bridge. I think that's great. So good job.
I'll pass that on.
This is somewhat related, so if this isn't the best time to bring it up, I apologize. But I noticed recently when I, was at a station hearing these alerts, the standard speaker that you hear, like just announcing, like the train is arriving, or whatever, is a man. And whenever there's a delay alert, it's a woman's voice. And I know that sounds so silly, but like really, like just the public perception, you're always annoyed if you're gonna hear a delay. So I don't know if that's.
I think it's just Susie.
Oh, okay, that's one interpretation.
So a robo voice or a person's voice?
Just robo voice.
Robo voice. Okay.
Yeah, I think she's trying to say like you hear Frank, Frank who does the actual voiceovers, and then there's a woman's voice that says "attention passenger," and that's I think is what she's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely take that feedback back. Yeah, the New York City subway cars have a similar pattern that's a little, I'll take that kind of thing. The other, yes, thank you for mentioning the sort of the frequency of updates and the specificity, because another part of this is transparency. And for instance, one thing that we're being more specific about is when a delay is caused by smoke on the track or a track fire. And that has led to a sudden amount of interest in the fact that there are small fires on MBTA tracks. We actually just rolled out sort of a small publicity campaign about please do encouraging customers to please throw things out in trash cans and not just throw them into the pit, because trash thrown into the track pit is a leading cause of trash fires. So yeah, I don't know, it's just an interesting case of where transparency has actually led to led to sort of a different action because the conversation was started.
You think in a perfect future state, we'll have alerts that say the red line experiencing 5 or 10 minute delays because people were standing in the doorways? I'm only half kidding, though, by the way. I'm only half kidding, seriously.
One where they said, oh, we were delayed because we had to escort someone off the train.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
We had to escort off the train and out of the station, I think is what the message said. It was very detailed.
Yeah, but the reason I'm only half kidding about that is we've talked for a while on and off about ways of modifying customer behavior, leading the horse to water. Whether or not there's a panacea for affecting behavior, I don't know. But now that you've mentioned, behavior changes coming out of the fire and trash connection.
It's an interesting. I'll take that back. Another thing we're doing in the alerts area, we plan to launch this summer, is a new T-Alerts sign-up process and logic for what alerts you receive and don't receive. Right now, T-Alerts is when you subscribe to T-Alerts, it's kind of a blunt instrument. You can find out everything that is going on the red line from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. or know nothing about it. So the system that we're moving to will ask for some information about your commute, what stations do you ride between and when, and we'll use that to filter down, only send alerts that actually are relevant to that person. If we're going to be closing a garage at a particular station, but you don't park at a station and you don't ride that part of the red line, we will not send you a text message about it. Another change is that unplanned disruptions you'll be able to get as a text message or an email. You can subscribe that way. But planned disruptions will be aggregated into a weekly digest. So to sort of give you hopefully an easier to process view and sort of fewer interruptions about what's coming up.
How does this tie into the alerts you can sign up for on the transit app? Is it the same, or they would have to implement something similar to get that same benefit?
There's nothing about sort of this transition that relates to the alerts that the transit app has. The transit app is using alerts from sort of the same source that drives this, as well as the existing system, as well as they also run it in with other rider submitted issues.
But I guess they would have to make a change on their end to give you. So I'm liking the direction you're going with the greater level of granularity in how do if I'm an app user as opposed to a text message or email subscriber. How do I when and how would I see those benefits?
You wouldn't.
That was the answer I was afraid of.
And that's partly because if you subscribe to using an app, there's so many more things that an app could do that you can't do through a subscription service. That it's a little bit of a different problem to solve. TransApp has taken sort of their approach, which is partly that they prioritize simplicity. So it is very, very easy to sign up for rush hour alerts on Redline or different services. And I think basically we'll be able to share some of the feedback that we get about this approach with partners like the Transit app, and they can evaluate whether there are features that they want to borrow. But it would really be on them to do it.
This looks like if you have a unique trip. Just so you know, I'm on the T all day long. Mm-hmm. I get T alerts from the 39 bus, that hour of day. I want to keep that. Mm-hmm. I want all the alerts. So to me, it looks like I don't leave at the same time every day. I return from all different stops. I don't see how my needs are.
You'd still get that. This is only if you want. I'll let you answer. This is only if you choose to add a level of granularity. You can have everything.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a view of the commuter rail. The bus alerts don't ask you to specify sort of stations in the same way. You can specify pretty broad ranges of time, but that is some feedback that we'll be watching out for, because it is more focused on routine trips, at least when we first launch it. So I'm going to want to, when you try it out, I'm going to want to know if you are happy with what you can get.
I'll let you know, all right.
Okay.
You said one of them that you could toggle on and off would be the parking.
Yeah.
What about elevators and escalators being out?
Yes, that will continue to be available as sort of its own. Yes, those will be available, and we will be.
But also will be able to toggle off.
Yes. Yes. And you'll be able to sign up for elevators, but not escalators. Something that you can't do with the current system.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay. So we're coming to the end of the presentation. So everything up till now has really been about customer information. This is not as much about customer information. This is about operations. So what are some of the things the MBTA is doing to, well, I really want to highlight one thing that the MBTA is working on to improve operations, and that's a project called Glides. Have you guys heard about Glides? Oh, no? Okay. Glides is interesting because it's serving an important need, but it's also a little bit of an experiment for us. It's focused on green line operations and giving tools to operations staff to help them manage the service better. We're taking a sort of an unusual approach to how, or a new for us approach to how we run the project. One is that it's a design thinking approach that's and sort of following this kind of flow. Another is that it's time boxed. So the initial work is there's a 3-month period. You're on this the entire time. You have a team that has some MBTA employees and some contractors sort of working together. Do your research, build something, prototype it, get it out there in 3 months, go. And so that's, yeah, this is sort of a view of what will launch, which doesn't look all that radical necessarily. It doesn't look, probably doesn't look that different from other, screenshots you may have seen of dispatching systems. But I think that how the team got there in 3 months instead of through a 18-month procurement process in which we just define exactly what we need and then get it and can never make any changes to it. Working closely with operations staff, assessing their needs, talking to them about different things that would work, and trying to build something quickly. I think it may serve as a model for future sort of technology projects that we undertake at the MBTA. Or it might not. We're not at the end yet, so we don't know yet, fully how well did it, we're not finished with our assessment of how it went, but we think it's been very promising in producing something that is going to be useful to inspectors, that will help them manage the service better, and doing it quickly, and putting us in a position where we can then improve on it. Yes.
You said manage the service better in terms of what measures or characteristics?
I suppose that's, manage the service is quick. Minute-to-minute management of where the trains are, which operators are headed where, which trains should hold, which trains we might want to extend past, short term at Park Street instead of having them go all the way to Government Center like they normally would. as well as help inspectors through some of their other operational tasks. So presenting more information to them that they frequently need so presenting it to them digitally so that they don't need to use the radio as often, so that the radio stays clear for important communication. So that's what it's about. We did not want to take the approach of revolutionizing the way that the Green Line operates, which is a lot of, it's an intriguing idea and I'd love to get there, but we wanted to do something in a short period of time where we could deliver something with value. And that meant looking at how does the Green Line operate now, and what are the pain points that we can address so that people can make the decisions they're already making with more information and therefore make better decisions.
So would the customer-facing result be better reliability, better communications, or something else?
Better reliability is number one deliverable, and we are going to be monitoring for that, of course, as we roll it out. But we're also going to be monitoring a lot from the inspectors who are using the app. And do you find it useful, or do you find it, or not? I don't think this is going to lead to a 10% jump in on-time performance when we roll it out, especially because we're initially going to roll it out to just a subset of inspectors. Because there are so many different things that affect on-time performance from day to day. But we do think that we can put the people managing the service in a position to make better decisions with more information.
And if you find that that's successful both in terms of the new process and improved reliability, is it something that you'd consider extending to bus operations?
We've talked about the idea. I think it's...
I mean, it's too early to decide anything,
yeah.
But I hope so.
It's something we're thinking about. I think there's a lot more commonality in bus service from one agency to another than in rail service. So the Green Line is sort of a unique beast in ways that MBTA bus service is not. So there are reasons to why sort of broader sort of existing products from other companies might be more applicable to bus service. But that said, it is something that we're thinking about.
I have two quick bus questions. One from the audience on whether the data that you're collecting can help with bunching. And then secondly, question from myself. I notice, especially off hours, weekends, things like that, I'm more apt to arrive at a bus stop and see the bus pulling away before the scheduled arrival because they're able to get ahead when the roads aren't so occupied. So how do you manage those two things?
Well, nothing that sort of I talked about in this presentation would really be that helpful for bus function.
Yeah, okay.
I think that if we were, as we think about, okay, what are we going to learn from glides? I think the thing about that is that would definitely be one of the possible focuses of if we were to look at taking a similar approach, because what we use dispatching tools that are considered quite good. They're some of the market leaders, but there's still a lot of bus bunching, so we really don't have this figured out yet. So nothing that I talked about, but it is certainly something to think about. As for early departures, are you referring to from the first stop of the trip? Or
No, but pretty close sometimes. And I get, if the road's wide open and people are on the bus, they want to keep moving. So there's obviously a tension between getting them to their destination quicker or making sure you're picking up other people along the route.
I think Dave Carney said they can't locate the bus at the terminal. They only have, so they only know their stopping point maybe at the first stop or the second stop. Because I brought this up in connection with the 55 bus in Fenway that often leaves early. Maybe 1 or 2 minutes, but if you're running.
Right.
Yeah. I think that in particular, looking at historical data, the part where our data collection is the weakest is the first stop and the last stop. That's,
you know, especially
like
off hours or weekends, if it's 40 minutes between buses and you get to the stop when it's pulling away, it's not that.
yeah.
It's not the end of the world, but it's not necessarily great.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's certainly. I mean, it's. If we said we would leave at 5:40 and we left at 5:38 or 5:39, then we're breaking our agreement with the customer. So I mean, it is
yeah,
quite
but
serious.
customers can adjust to try to get there a little bit earlier. And I have one last question, which is completely different, off the wall. So I was having breakfast with a friend I had breakfast with every Tuesday, and he remarked that people are noticing that they're getting advertisements on computers and phones from conversations when agents like Siri are listening to conversations, and the people aren't talking to them, but they're picking up the conversation. And I don't want you to comment on the ethics of that, but I'm wondering, like I have a senior card, some other people on the committee have a senior card, so it's probably got a unique ID. So you're probably actually able, if I wanted or you wanted, and there was an opt-in, to kind of track all the trips I do and kind of know what information might be helpful to me by doing that. I mean, that may be far in the future, but I just thought I would bring that up. I don't think you would want to do that without somebody opting into it. But if somebody had a very regular pattern of travel and you were heavily dependent on a service, and you're able to give them kind of a automated custom feedback loop, that might be helpful.
I think that in particular, as we move towards the new fare collection system,
yeah.
I think that's an area where we are going to be doing a lot of thinking. This new dealer sign-up process. The password requirement is going to be stricter than the existing system. And the reason that it's stricter is, whether people think of it this way or not, we're asking people to submit information that is personal about them. This is, I get on it, this train at this time.
Yeah, I'm happy to have that collected for me, but other people may not, and certainly would appreciate your paying attention to the privacy.
I think that the MBTA's privacy policy is very strict and is very strictly enforced, it will be as we get to. It's going to be tricky to deliver. There are definitely some benefits that could be delivered to customers in sort of the near future if we ignore the privacy, that we won't be delivering to customers because we take the privacy policies.
Yeah. Thank you.
Chris?
No, I just want to say I was under the impression that when they rolled out the Charlie card system many years ago, that the whole privacy and the tracking issue had come up because they do know where you go because the database does keep track of where you swipe your card. And I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this was shot down very quickly because privacy experts didn't like the idea that there was no anonymity with riding transit. I thought that was
what was shot down?
I thought that the privacy experts kind of really were against this, and the team kind of backed down. And they tracked some of it, but that it was in a manner that could be tracked back to the user unless you registered your Charlie card.
Mm-hmm. I know that the data is pretty closely is very closely guarded. It's when it's only used in limited ways for research purposes. When it is, it's separated from anything that would identify it, would link it to any information that someone had provided about themselves.
Well, I'll get you off the hook. And David Block-Schechter is on our short list for guests for the next month or two.
Okay.
So he's hopefully going to be joining us to talk about AFC 2.0
Okay.
and all those related issues, perhaps as early as next month.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if this would act like how feasible this is, but I've been on a commuter rail train before and wanted to know, like I tried to use Google Maps to be like, hey, when am I going to get there? Like, do I need to tell someone I'm going to be late? And I was wondering if there was a way to maybe, you know, be like, I am on this particular train, you know, what delays is this train going through? Because I had to do this thing, like, and when I'm on the Green Line too, I have to like plug in like the next station to see like when it's going to get to, you know, my final destination. So I don't know if there's a way to, you know, say I am actually on this particular ride.
To say to
like Google Maps or Transit or something, or tracking.
Yeah.
Well, if actually, the Transit app does have something very similar to that. It's called, I think it's called Go, and it will monitor your trip in real time and give you updated estimates of when you'll arrive. So, yeah, so Transit app actually does do something very simple.
I actually wrote my two Google MBTA mapping apps exactly for that reason, because I wanted to be able to show, well, here's a train, what's the projection of that train getting somewhere else, or what's the interrelationship between that and others? Are they bunched together, that kind of thing? I mean, you could try out mine.
So I know, but sorry, I know, but it seemed like I've just started surfing.
No, it's okay. Are we running out of time for you?
No, well, I wanted to. We were talking about privacy, and I wanted to just get a feel from the room about something.
Hmm?
Metro launched something called My Trip Time, where if you enter your Metro card number, it will give you a personalized report of their on-time performance as provided to you. So that's because, of course, Metro, you subway, you need to swipe in and swipe out, so they know when you entered and left the system, and compare that against when you should have been able to leave the system if service was running normally. So I thought I was going to end this with a question, but I'm not actually sure what my question is, since I don't know enough about how it works to know what the privacy implications are. If you're just entering your own Metro card ID and not associating it with yourself, then
Yeah, I think though also that tap in and tap out one way or another could be enormously helpful to you guys.
that is true.
Yeah. Len, you had a question?
Yeah, so just about a couple, I held off because I didn't know if you were going to cover them. On the polling, where you're going to be polling every few seconds as opposed to every 60 seconds, will that feed into things like Nextbus in order to help them with their predictions?
Yes.
Well, okay, and the others on the solar panels, and are they going to have battery backup, and how will they work on our long, cold winter days where, I'm sorry, our short winter days where the nights are very long? Yeah.
That is one of the reasons we are doing a pilot. One can do the math with the vendors of this is what the power requirements are. This is the amount of backup battery you need in order to make it through winter, based on how much sunlight you'll actually get. And we want to see how well they actually do last through winter.
Would they have battery backup?
They will have battery backup for it's been cloudy for a couple of days.
Right.
But not. But the objective is not to make it through the winter by using batteries.
Right. No, I got it. Yeah. Okay. So the next place nighttime too. Okay, curious. Thank you.
Yeah.
Big Belly seems to work. Those garbage disposals, so they're solar powered.
Yes, they're smooshing things. That takes a lot of power.
Yeah, but they don't have to smush them all the time.
It's true.
Following up on the question about data sources, I think at one point, or maybe even currently, the NextBus data. I mean, if you're an app developer, you get NextBus data deliberately because you want the NextBus data. If you want the MBTA data, you go to the MBTA data source. Are those the only two sort of places in a virtualized sense to get the data? I mean, is it all MBTA in the new version 3 API you mentioned and NextBus, and that's it? Or are there other subtleties of places where the data is available?
I mean, we haven't nixed the V2 API yet, so it's still available there. We offer both the API and our GTFS real-time feed.
I just mean in terms of like the source of authority, because in terms of like the prediction data. The MBTA produces predictions. NextBus produces their own predictions.
NextBus produces their own predictions. We pay NextBus to give us those predictions.
Okay.
But I would still advise any developer to go to our API and not NextBus's. And today is a good example. NextBus had some kind of technical problem, and their predictions went offline, and then came back for us very, very slowly over the course of hours. So we switched to a competitor to offer predictions for a few hours, and then we switched back.
Cool.
So yeah, that's one example of why I think our API is the better place to go.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to hear what comes out of that bid process.
When you have this new system put in, am I, on my flip phone, going to be able to call the number, punch in the stop number, and get the same prediction that NextBus now gives me?
Not necessarily, no, because we never required NextBus to do that, and it wasn't part of our previous contract with them. It's not part of this contract requirement. So depending on who wins this bid, if NextBus wins it, they might continue to offer that. If a competitor wins it, it depends on whether they sort of view there being sort of an advantage to offering it.
And I have another question. Are you involved with the website at all? The total website?
So I work in the customer technology group, and most of sort of the projects that I've been talking about are in the customer technology group. The new website is in the customer technology group. I didn't put it in this presentation because there's so much going on with it, and I don't really feel qualified to speak about a lot of it. But I work very close to the website folks.
I'm going to speak about a little part that annoys me. The old website, I used to be able to go to a location, say in Dorchester, where I had a meeting, and say transit system or transit are available around, and then I would figure out during my day how I would get there the best way. Wouldn't be necessarily that I come from my home. Now I can't figure out how to do that on the new website, and I'm not going to bother to try.
I'm trying to think of how to do it. Whether you could do it with the search box on the main page, or if you need to go to the trip planner. I'm not sure.
But the old trip planner used to say transit available around address or something like that. I would click on that and see 8, 16, 43, 21 are all going there. I made up those things.
So let's see, 10 Park Plaza, Boston. These are the bus stops that are near here, and the services. So you should try that. It might meet your needs. If you enter the address into the box at the top of the page.
She said she wasn't going to try.
That's like, what are you gonna do?
Go back in the middle of the transition to the, I think RTR, the new technology. Is that going to help end of line estimations?
Yes, that is one of the motivators for pursuing. I mean, especially on the green line, where we currently don't do end-of-line predictions. But yes, we do also.
So does that mean the Green Line will get end-of-line predictions?
Yes. Not now. Initially, RTR, the goal is to reach feature parity with HRRT, so we can retire HRRT.
Yeah.
But yes, then the goal is to be able to provide predictions for all rapid transit stops, including the ones at the very beginning of the Green Line, and to more accurately capture what's going to happen near terminals when service is a little bit behind schedule and not going to headway, which is when you tend to see bad terminal predictions on the heavy rail lines.
How about I apologize if I have to ask you. That be on high-speed line?
Well, that's what RTR launched with.
I know. That's what's worried.
But yeah, yes, predictions from the beginning of the line there too. That will not. We don't have it yet, but that'll be.
Right. So getting RTR doesn't actually solve that. You have to get on RTR first. It's the first step, and then there's additional work to, no matter what line it is, to add to get better at the end of line prediction.
Yes.
Pardon?
Oh, I forgot to ask earlier. Are the subway countdown signs, those ubiquitous orange LED signs, are they limited to having only 2 lines of text? Or if someone made the decision that a smaller font was possible, could they go to 3 lines?
I'm not sure whether the signs themselves can display 3 lines of text. They might be able to. I know that those sizes were sort of determined, according to meeting our accessibility goals, which is the primary goal putting in those signs.
Absolutely.
And also the interface that we had put into that system so that we could show predictions on those signs, that interface does assume 2 lines.
Okay. Okay. The reason I asked about that was you were talking earlier about having a variation on the status if there's delays instead of just 1 minute away, and that's why I was thinking about, well, can there be more data packed in there? But if not, there's more and more video ad boards that are being deployed everywhere. So
yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's shorter than a haiku. It's you have so few characters to work with.
Right.
Right now, long messages are presented as a series of 2-line snippets, one after the other, right? Which is fine.
And those will continue to play a part. We want to be able to do more with the static messages too.
Any other questions for David? I think we've gone way over time, and thank you for being so generous with your time.
Welcome.
Any other final quick things?
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, great work. Here, I'll grab that cable. Oh, thank you. Oh, sorry. Thanks again for bringing this. Great work. Thank you so much. Meeting updates and then conclusions. Well, thank you.
I got the head volunteer email they're going to start class so they can just read just
Excellent.
stay on the dog and say
I always use the marathon. Once they get the marathon.
All right. On to the rest of our agenda, which is subcommittee reports.
You want to start with the capital factors?
Yes.
All right, so this month we had another great guest that Glenn lined up. This is Victor Rivas from the MBTA. He's on the funding and capital budget side. So what he was there to talk about was how the MBTA is preparing for new FTA guidelines. So the new FTA guidelines are coming in. They're a little bit tied to the federal transit dollars that the MBTA receives. They aren't going to influence the amount of money that the MBTA gets from the federal government, but they are going to kind of set a framework and hopefully drive those dollars towards the most needed projects. So what the FTA is coming and doing and asking the MBTA to really assess their inventory of capital assets, kind of come up with a rating for those assets, a current condition, and then also setting performance targets for improving those assets going forward. So what this does is it fits in with the asset management projects that are going on at the MBTA, which I know that Len is a big proponent of, that the Capital Finance Committee is a big proponent of asset management at the MBTA. Another thing that it will do is provide an inventory, which is one of the next steps there. So that is kind of my summary of Victor's talk. Len, anything to add on that piece of it? Sounds good. Any questions? Okay, sorry, I thought you had one. The other thing that we talked about, we kind of followed up on the proposal from last month about that I had kind of led on the West Station development and MBTA third-party payments. So I did present that to the subcommittee. One thing that we did talk about is that the MBTA, Carl Funds, is now exploring on their own, developing a third-party payment policy. This would be a policy that governs incoming local funding for new expansion projects. So they are kind of looking at their own. So I think the suggestion out of that was to kind of morph the letter into a letter of support of that and kind of a letter of influence on how that ending policy looks, as opposed to urging the T to adopt one. So it looks like they're headed in that direction. So those are kind of my 2 minutes from the meeting. But
that's pretty much it. Sure. We covered some of the slide decks from FSCB, but we'll talk about those in more detail if we have time. Sure. And I'll just add that I just found out that Victor Rivas' last day is going to be this Friday.
Oh no!
That's why he was so happy.
No comment. But Victor's just been really great. He has participated in lots of subcommittee meetings over the years. In fact, and I think he might have attended the capital subcommittee meetings before we merged the capital group with the finance group. And so he's always been a really valuable resource, a helpful resource, and a person who's really been committed to providing as much transparency as possible about the T to an entity like us. So, yeah. So we'll miss him. Do you know what he's going
to do?
He told. I have to refer to my text message.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
So if you guys are going to have to modify that letter, is that something you think you'll take up the next subcommittee and have for the full committee next month sign up?
I think that's the goal. So yeah, the next subcommittee bring that back and then hopefully get it to the full committee.
That would be great.
Cool.
All right,
any questions? Yeah, please.
Yeah, so we actually didn't have a meeting last month due to the snowstorm. We actually had Dave lined up to come join us, but when we canceled that meeting, for not having a conference room available, we had Dave come to this meeting. For anyone who doesn't know me yet, I'm Brad. You'll see me in some emails from time to time. So since we didn't have a meeting, I just kind of wanted to give a couple of items that I have. I have like a running list of stuff we've talked about, stuff we could talk about more, stuff to kind of revisit later. Just a couple of ones that I thought we would love to revisit in future meetings. Is if we get someone in from the team to talk about signage and wayfinding. That one's come up multiple times where a lot of cases where there would be a message displayed at a station that doesn't get taken down, and say you were coming and visiting the city, you might think that this station's closed, and perhaps it's been open for a year, like say Government Center. We've never had anyone come in, or at least since I've been on the Rock, talking about ferry service. It's kind of just like something that no one really thinks about unless you ride it. So I think it'd be great to have someone come in and kind of talk to the Rock about ferry service, how many customers they serve, what's going on over in that department.
They serve alcohol on the ferries.
I mean, it'd probably be good for motion sickness. There's been a lot of talk, kind of in the transit theater, about bus rapid transit lately, and I've always felt like that's one of those things where the more we talk about it, the more likely it's going to happen if we push city officials and I guess state officials to make that happen. So I'm thinking about trying to see who we could have come in maybe from the city of Boston to talk about bus rapid transit, because although the T is a state agency, you really need to have the municipalities where these bus lanes could exist really come to the table. So I just want to kind of see from like a city perspective what's being done on that front to try to see if we can get more bus rapid transit routes.
A comment on that, the transportation guy from Everett would be a...
Yeah, I was just going to say maybe having someone from Everett come.
Yeah, because I think they've had the most successful pilot.
Or better yet, have someone from Boston and the guy from Everett in the same room so he can explain how it's done.
Those are some of the big ones I had jotted down. If anyone ever has any input for some of these meetings, you feel free to email out and say, like, I want to talk about this. Like, could we try to line up a guest? Maybe you know someone at the T or from this, surrounding city who you think would want to talk to us about something. Always open to try to have as many guests as possible, get everyone's input, just have a good discussion. So.
Yeah, I think Lynn wants me to speak about the ride and my experience at Local Compact. So I actually know a lot about their operations, so I'll probably explain it to you guys how things actually work over there, because the operation will not change from when they switch contractors. So I can provide a lot of detail, and it's probably very interesting for the group. So really wanted me to do that. So every time it comes up, I talk for about 10 minutes. So
cool.
That sounds great. Yeah, please.
I was going to try to bring this up at the meeting, but it got canceled. We talked about dropped trips on buses.
Yep.
And I saw new information in the FMCD budget slides. There was a mention about increasing the budget for operators in order to reduce dropped trips. And one of the things there they mentioned, wasn't sure whether they say they would reduce dropped trips by 50%. They mentioned 500 drop trips a week. And it wasn't clear whether that was, they now have 500 drop trips, or that by increasing the budget by however many million, they would reduce there are 1,000 and they'd reduce it to 500. But anyway, there's some new publicly available information now, and it'll be interesting to hear from bus folks about what's up with that between hiring and just the information about dropped bus trips.
I haven't read the exact yet. Did they say how many trips there are? Did they say where the drop trips were distributed across the schedule? No, okay.
No.
I brought this up before, but the 55, 3 o'clock from Queensbury is dropped every day, and it's on the schedule. I told them, take it off the schedule if you can't make it. So I don't know, and that's the bus that I take occasionally. There must be other buses where similar things happen, that it's dropped the same every day. It should be off the schedule if you can't make it.
That's right.
All right. I don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me.
All right.
What do we have?
The next item is approval of minutes.
Yes. The minutes were out electronically. I guess, any concerns about the minutes? Did everybody have a chance? Okay. If no objections, I guess, do I have a motion to accept the minutes for January and February?
Motion to accept.
And a second? Okay. Minutes approved. I saw that James already put them up, or maybe Len put them up, somebody put them up on the website already.
I'm not touching the website. Nothing against it, it's more, yeah, it's just, it's all James.
No, it's fine, yeah. So the minutes from January, February are already up there, so that's great. Thank you to James.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's the one who's watching online, but if he is, thanks, James.
Did the agenda get mailed out? I'm just curious.
Yes, it did.
Okay. I mean, I know I mailed it to the executive committee, I didn't track after that.
Oh,
Did
oh,
you
oh.
get it? Okay, I thought James mailed that out, but.
I didn't notice that either.
Have you all gotten agendas at all?
I have before, but I didn't this month.
You didn't this month?
Okay, well, apologies.
Yeah.
It's okay.
And so, like, maybe James just missed it, because once I sent it out to the executive committee and
Right.
James, I kind of stopped reading
Yep.
the thread.
Okay, I'll take that as a to-do item.
Yeah, no, well, if James has been doing it, then we'll just ask him why he hasn't done it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, and I guess are we into new and old business, or
So
what are we?
the other item was discussion about ROC's
Yes, thank you.
spokesperson in response to queries.
So I think that was something that I brought up, or did you guys talk about the executive?
Yeah, we talked about it. So the conclusion was that especially for stuff that goes through the ROC website, which gets fed to everyone, being on in the Google group, the executive committee, will see it, and within 48 hours, make sure that someone responds to it, either someone from the executive committee or someone, that they ask to respond to it. But at the same time, if anyone who's not on the committee sees it and wants to respond to it, all you have to do is, either let someone in the executive committee know, or just let the group know that you're taking that ball, and it's yours. So we're not trying to stop anyone not on the executive committee from handling it. It's more just saying that that is the mechanism, that we'll use to deal with it. And so since everyone is seeing it, once again, if you want to deal with it, just say you want to deal with it. And I don't think anyone on the executive committee is going to object to that.
No.
And certainly as we get to know people's expertise or areas of expertise, we may very well ask you to chime in on it. So if someone comes in complaining about the ride, it's going to be that guy's.
So Lynn, in that scenario, would somebody then, or an inquiry comes in, somebody wants to respond, brings it to the executive committee, committee's okay, are they then speaking on behalf of the ROC at that point, or are they still speaking on their own? What's the kind of committee comfortable with?
Well,
go ahead.
I don't remember if it's in the bylaws. I mean, I won't take the time to read them. Well, and thank you, Ryan, for. We have laminated copies of the bylaws, by the way, so they'll hold up over time. I don't believe it's in the bylaws, but I believe the gist of the feeling is that the full committee votes, or at least tries to reach consensus first before any one person would speak for the whole committee. Does that sound about right from your experience?
Well, I think this deals like, say someone asks a question and we answer me. So yeah, you are answering on behalf of the ROC. And so if you have any concerns about whether your answer is right or not, then run it by, several people, whatever, you may say something that turns out, not to be right for whatever reason. Well, hey, people make mistakes, and as long as your intention is good, then you made a mistake and we correct for it. But at that point, yeah, you are kind of speaking for the ROC. Just like if someone like from the Globe or something asks to speak with someone, and we say, okay, well, this is the person's going to speak. Well, at that point, they are speaking for the ROC, and we're just going to hope, that they are being responsible, being in their answers. And if they ask something that the ROC hasn't agreed upon, then say, well, yes, I'm a member of the ROC, but this is my position that is not, something the group is taking a position on, but, as a member, this is my feelings about it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think a little bit till the end. So Stone mentioned about, usually we try to bring that back to the whole committee. I guess I'm thinking, the newspaper asks for something for a story in 2 days, we might always have the opportunity to get back to the whole committee. So I was thinking, how can we be nimble, give an official response in a short period of time, and the best way to do that. So
Well, my feelings about that, if I can answer,
please,
is that be something we're just not going to be able to speak to, because it is too short a time frame, and I would rather us not respond to something than to take a position. So, for instance, there was a case where they were reporting on the salaries of various T staff, and I think they were like wanting to know how we felt about that. Well, that data just came out. The group didn't take a position on it. And it's like, well, we're not taking a position on this because we just don't act that quickly. And I think that's a good thing overall. But,
yeah, last fall when I don't know if you might have heard it, the T came out with almost like a press release saying 90% of all trips are on time. That kind of made a big media splash for about a week or so. The Channel 5 investigative reporter called me up and asked for, what's my opinion on this? Do you agree with that? I didn't go for it. I was just like, I haven't seen it. Too early.
Or the group doesn't have a position on it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the only, and I respect the way we've done it for years because I understand the intentions of why we do that. But these things do pop up quickly and dissipate, and the way we kind of work is we bring it to a subcommittee and a conversation, and that moment's passed. By the time we have a letter out about it 2 months later. So I think we do miss an opportunity to get into the conversation, if you will, and not only get into the conversation, get into the media, and then therefore drive more attention to the work that we do. So I can't think of a better way to do it, but in maintain the integrity of how we've had our experience before, but something I'll noodle on because I think it'd be great visibility for this group to have to have quotes in the paper. How do you do that in a group that's trying very hard to be equitable and not have one? It's easier when it's a smaller transit group that has a strong leader that everybody just trusts the leader, but we're more of a democracy is the wrong word, but more of a collaborative. It's harder to respond, but we miss an opportunity.
How about saying whoever responds saying a member of the ROC, not saying you're speaking of the ROC?
But that distinction is going to be missed. And I hear what you said. Can I?
Yeah. I just want to make sure, Carl, after
why don't you go ahead, Carl? Because I've been yapping. Go ahead, and I'll talk about it.
Okay.
So one thought about how to address this is over time to build up a set of policy positions or things that we can just, when somebody calls, a lot of these things come up year after year, and to be able to say, oh, we strongly support blah, 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 and we value this over that, or statements that express some position without necessarily addressing a pointed question about, it might be we support transparency and something else in the case of the.
It's a really good point. If we were able to, in a calmer moment, come up with a list of kind of standard responses, if you will, that
around fares, around buses, around
a list of positions. And then knowing the scenario, not knowing ever what that magic scenario that would come up, someone could pick off that list and say, here's our standard response when it comes to.
I can always say I can't really comment about the specific issue, but the ROC always believed in transparency in fund funding or something like that.
That
literally satisfies gives you an answer and.
But it could be also stronger and say this is our policy position.
Yes.
So it's not
I think we have some work to get there to be able to have that list.
Yeah, the ROC fully endorses the North-South Rail Link, for example. Sorry, I had to say that. I hate to say it. No, but on a serious note, and I always preface this by saying, my disclaimer: I'm a geek, I'm a computer guy, I'm a technology guy, so I tend to gravitate towards technology solutions. But having said that, we probably all have cell phones that receive texts. I could imagine where if something came in and we all needed to have consensus on an issue within like a 24, 48-hour time frame, we could figure out a way to just blast out text message to everybody and say, hey, can we all get on a conference call at X time? Here's the issue, you know, and then people could just reply back, yes, no, this time. I mean, it wouldn't be perfect, but you know, we have possible ways of reaching. Yeah, go ahead, Len, then Wig, and then Chris.
Well, I kind of like the way it works now. It's just an informal listserv where people just give their own response, and often we get an answer from people who are looking at it, like Rob or you know someone like Andy or something like that. I think that's really helpful to have something without bureaucracy. With regard to official positions, if there's something that's really controversial and there's someone outside putting pressure on the rock, then I think that's a different thing, and people should be sensitive to that. And you cannot do a private conference call for a public body. That's not legal. You could not round up this group and have a conference call that's not public and deliberate on it. It's not legal under Massachusetts state law. So you need to be careful with that.
Okay. This came up last meeting, and I personally don't feel comfortable, or I don't fully understand how then we can have subcommittee meetings that are not open to the public.
They are open. They have to be open to the public.
They are open to the public.
Look,
they are open to the public.
Look, there are two.
They don't know about it.
There are I thought this was a discussion we had about, because someone asked at another meeting, do we need to advertise our subcommittee meetings because public meetings have to be advertised in the paper? That was like the marketing meeting, the communication meeting, I think, in January. That was someone had asked that, and the answer was no, because we really don't, or we shouldn't.
Yeah, it's not. That's not correct.
No, I don't know.
I think it's just time out for a second.
Yeah, it's.
There are two things everybody in this body needs to know. You need to know the state ethics law, and you need to know the public meeting law. And they're not that complicated, and you need to operate by them, especially under controversy. If there's a controversy, you can't go around that. A conference call with this body that's not open to the public is not legal, unless it falls under one of the legal exceptions. You know, if it's discussing a confidential financial information, if it's discussing litigation, or if it's discussing personnel. Other than that, it's not legal.
I'll read up on it for myself.
I'm not saying you have to get down in the weeds, but I am saying that people in this group have to have a little bit of a sense of feeling for those two areas of law, the ethics law and the public meeting law.
Why don't we all take that as a task?
Yeah,
At least our next ROC meeting, we all look up the public meeting.
I'll do some homework.
Well, independently of that, what I was going to say is that I guess I'm more of a fan of deliberation, and so I feel that there are a few things that really require an immediate, rapid response, and so it often takes time, you know, to go through stuff, you know, and analyze it and come to the conclusion in which you feel comfortable that you are closer to the truth than farther away from it. And so, for me, you know, not being part of a heated conversation is okay. And,
you and I can, as we often do, agree to disagree. I respect and understand the position you're taking, but I think we lose our voice in the debate when we choose to not have a voice.
Yeah, and I guess me, I feel as if I'm fine, you know, if I'm not having a voice when I'm not confident that what I'm saying is correct, and so that's pretty much where I'm coming from. And I generally, especially when the issue is complex, takes me a while, you know, to be confident, you know, that what I'm going to say, you know.
There's a foundational question of whether this organization should have a voice or not. I think it's something we'll continue to debate amongst ourselves. And I think we can do our. I think within the operations subcommittee, I think maybe we'll take a first stab at Carl's suggestion of coming up with some high-level principles that we believe in. Maybe not as positions, but maybe we couch them as principles. and we'll take them back to this broader group if we have success there.
Yeah, well, I certainly think that's a good idea. I mean, but then there will be times when we just don't know what to say. It may take us a little while to determine what to say.
Yep. All right. I guess we'll discuss this further later. Very quickly, reports on external meetings.
Okay, so RTAC did not have a meeting. It was canceled because of weather also. With respect to RTAC, the Regional Transportation Advisory Committee, I am representing us on that group. If someone else wants to, by all means, let me know. I'm doing so because my schedule allows me to do so. But if someone else wants to, that would be great. And it would be great in this context, and that is that I have been appointed to the Arlington Transportation Advisory Committee. And so, if I knew that someone here wanted to regularly attend those meetings on behalf of the ROC, then I would ask the Arlington Transportation Advisory Committee, which I will now call ATAC, to consider becoming a part of the RTAC. But if no one here wants to do that, or they don't feel they can do that consistently, I don't want the ROC to lose its seat on the RTAC, so I'll be happy to continue representing the ROC on the RTAC until.
Can you tell us more about what that is?
So the RTAC is umbrella group for groups like the Arlington Transportation Advisory Committee, the ROC, and other kind of local transportation entities that they meet, and then the RTAC has a seat at the table on the Boston MPO, which is the big planning entity for the Boston region. MPO is Boston Metropolitan Planning Organization. So they have meeting once a month on the second Wednesday of the month from 3 till 4:30. It's in this building, conference room number 4. They get these fairly high-level guests, and it's a well-run meeting. Actually, Tegan, what's her last name? She came here to our meeting. She's now the co-chair of that group. So it's an interesting group. Usually this is between 15 to 20 people at the table. So you learn a lot, but not only about transit. So it's about transportation in general. So I would say, maybe a third of the time we're talking transit, which is a significant amount. 25 to 30% of the time we talk about transit, but there are other things. But it's kind of nice to know how it all fits together. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add, if you Google for just RTAC, you get tons of things that are not related, but if you Google for RTAC Boston, the first hit is the right one. So RTAC Boston, Google search, you're there.
Are those meetings open? If we didn't want to take your seat.
Oh, they're open yet? Yeah.
You can sign up for the list to get the agendas.
Yeah.
And, like the MPO, it's well served by the
CTPS.
Yeah, by the staff on this floor.
What's the meeting schedule then?
It's the second Wednesday of the month from 3 to 4:30. Yeah.
That's not
hard.
Yeah. So let me know. And like I said, if someone does, then I will ask the Arlington transportation if they want to get on, and then I'll switch over to that, and I'll open up another seat for someone here. So that's standing invitation.
Yeah. Yeah. For what it's worth, at some point, once he gets settled in, our new mayor in Lynn, I believe, wants to have transportation advisory for the city, which hasn't been there before, and I'm going to see if I can get onto that. I don't know what the time frame is. He's only been in office since January, but there you go.
You just remind me I need to do the same for Chelsea, because there's been
Cool.
some rumbling for that too. So I'm usually the guy they ask. So
Excellent.
All right. Any other old business, new business in 5 minutes?
Yes. Just a reminder, the first day of Silver Line Gateway Chelsea service, airport to, I forget the name of the mall, but it's where the Market Basket is, right?
It's Chelsea Station.
Chelsea, yeah, right near Chelsea Station. Yeah, it's actually further than Chelsea commuter rail. It's like one stop further, but April 21, Saturday. It's the Saturday right before the next ROC meeting in a month.
Does anyone know if there's any ribbon cutting yet?
As soon as I find out, I will make sure it's on the list.
Because you know I'm going to be there and take photos.
Oh yeah, me too.
I plan on being on the first bus that leaves whatever direction it is and doing a video all the way there and a video all the way back.
Sweet.
So.
Remind me to get you the link for when I did exactly that on the first revenue trip from Wachusett Station into Fitchburg last fall. Not that I'm a geek or anything, but you know.
After 3 years of taking photographs of this project, I have to do it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. And talk about like big bang for the buck and on time, on budget. You know, how often does that happen?
They're actually not on budget. They've actually gone over. But
oh, how much?
Just a little bit. The project manager wouldn't tell me when I said, "Oh, you're on time and on budget." He really chuckled at me.
Oh.
So he says,
okay.
"Yeah, we're a little bit over," but they've rearranged the budget a little bit because there were some things that were part of other phases that they've incorporated into the initial opening. For example, like signals were being one. I think there were a couple other. I have to look at my notes that were added to phase one that really were supposed to be part of phase two.
Okay.
And then the commuter rail. So again, they're trying to make the service as best as possible right now. For example, like again, signal lights were not a part of the original plan. They were part of phase two. Those now are part of phase one. The Cottage Street crossing, there are 2 crossings where it's really low traffic, so there's stop signs. Those are now been moved from phase 3 to phase 2. So phase 3, by the way, is the commuter rail station.
Yeah.
If that ever happens. But
cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's great. I go by it twice a day on the commuter rail, so I'm following it through the window.
I drive right when I go to the supermarket every day.
Cool. Also on the note of new services, they're starting new early morning trips with the schedule change on April 1st. So a few routes will get extra morning service. I think 104 and 109 to Everett and 455 from Salem to Wonderland.
I'm surprised it seems like the 111 was one of those. I was kind of
the 111, I believe all of these trips are still within that like time after 4 a.m.
Okay.
So it's not starting like overall service any earlier, just some routes get more trips earlier but still after 4 a.m. So like the 70 and
so 111 is already kind of very early.
Yeah, the 111 is already
Yeah, I think the first run is 4:37, I believe. It leaves Woodlawn.
I understand. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So Mr. Rieger, do you have any news that you want to share with us?
Oh yeah. So this is my last meeting on the ROC.
Oh no.
I'm going to be actually at the City of Cambridge starting next Monday.
Congratulations.
So for the time being, if there's any questions about technical support for the ROC from CTPS, your favorite Jonathan Belcher is the point of contact. We're also hiring, so I'm sure one of those new people will also be here doing technical support and attending meetings in the future. But I think more importantly, I've definitely had a lot of fun coming to these meetings. It's a great excuse not to come home until about 7:30, at least once a month. Stay out and listen to people talk about transit and the issues that affect the Ds. So I definitely feel a very good, strong debt of gratitude to you all for allowing me here just to kind of sit and observe more than anything else. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You've been very helpful too, and certainly we have questions. You've been very helpful in providing answers.
Yep.
Nick Hart
here.
is leaving also. You replaced Nick.
I did replace Nick. Yeah.
So he's leaving also.
Bigger and better
CTPS
things.
is the brains of this organization, so it hurts me to hear people leaving. But I'm sure they'll find
some very capable people are out there. Yes.
All right, and 5 minutes for public comment.
This is not a comment, but a question. Do you think the next generation of T-maps is going to show the Chelsea green, silver line?
It does already. I took a picture of it and posted it last week. Ramirez, general manager, he actually was posting pictures the day before. I think Wednesday, they updated some of the maps at South Station. The big transit maps have been updated, and they're doing them system-wide over the next couple of weeks. That was like my biggest question, was when they were going to update the maps. So they're coming. The website has the schedule on it. It has the map, but the PDF of the SL3 is not there yet. I'm actually waiting for it.
Are those the neighborhood maps or the system maps?
The system maps were already updated. I think the neighborhood maps, I don't think are gonna be updated yet from what I saw. But it's coming. It's a slow process for the T to slowly update all the system maps.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Yeah, cool.
All right. If there are no further comments, we can adjourn 4 minutes early.
Yeah. Motion to adjourn?
Yeah. Motion to adjourn.
Seconded?
Second.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you for watching online, whoever you are, and good night.